Hey guys, tonight we drift back, way back, to a place of highlands and hollowed-out mountains, of ancient monasteries nestled into stone cliffs, and broad river valleys where morning mist still lingers like a secret. You're walking barefoot along the cool banks of the Awash River in what is now Ethiopia. The air is crisp, and the breeze smells faintly of damp earth and ash. You don't have a washing machine, obviously, or even a bar of soap in the way you'd think of it. What you do have are rocks, smoothed by centuries of water and use, and a wide basket slung over your back, filled with the weekly wash. Your arms ache already, and the sun isn't even high yet. You pass a woman balancing a large clay pot on her head, steam rising faintly from its wide mouth. She nods at you, eyes twinkling knowingly. It's laundry day, and you, like her, probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from a cozy spot somewhere across the world, post your location and local time. I love seeing where you're all tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step carefully across the rocky path, your feet pressing soft indentations into the reddish-brown soil. Your basket sways with every step, woven from reeds, lined in goat hair, and inside it rests a modest collection of linen tunics, cotton wraps, and a few embroidered pieces meant only for feast days. Your fingers are already tingling from the chilly air, and as you arrive at the river's edge, the sunlight begins to stretch across the water, dappling everything in gold. The women are already there, of course. They've staked their usual spots along the riverbed, each claiming a particular boulder that's worn smooth like old leather. The sound of water splashing mixes with gentle chatter, a few murmurs of gossip, and the clink of clay pots tapping against stone. This is no private ordeal. Washing here is communal, social, rhythmic, and sometimes even a little bit fun if your knuckles can survive it. You kneel by your chosen rock and begin the process. First, a quick shake. Each garment snapped against the wind, rid of surface dirt and any stray insects that might have decided your hemline made a good home. Then, into the water it goes. No detergent yet, just a few turns in the river, swirling like a sleepy fish caught in a lazy current. But the real trick, the thing that matters most, is the soap, or rather, the substitute for soap. You reach into a smaller pouch at your side and pull out a mix of volcanic ash and powdered enset fiber, the pulpy remains of a banana-like plant that grows across the southern highlands. It smells faintly like damp bread and smoke, and when it touches the water, it bubbles ever so slightly. Not frothy, more like a sigh. It's abrasive, gritty, and oddly comforting. And unlike the expensive imported lye cakes some wealthier townsfolk use, this stuff is homemade, reliable, community-traded, and frankly, easier on your hands. You rub the ash into the fabric, pressing the cloth against your stone in slow, circular strokes. It's hypnotic work. Press, turn, rinse, wring. The rhythm begins to lull your mind as you settle into a meditative pace. Sometimes, you even forget where you are. The birds chirp overhead, and someone nearby begins humming an old folk tune. You join in without thinking, your voice low and steady, almost like a second heartbeat. Historians still argue whether this technique, stone scrubbing with ash and plant fibers, was developed independently in multiple Ethiopian regions, or whether it spread along early trade routes. What's not up for debate, though, is how consistent the method was, even across centuries. In isolated villages, oral traditions preserved it. In highland monasteries, monks documented water temperatures and ash types in script notes, too smudged to read clearly today. You glance at an older woman across the river, her white shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders. She's using a different method entirely, pressing her linens with long strands of river grass bundled into a sort of sponge. It's an older technique, maybe handed down from her grandmother, maybe even older than that. You make a mental note to ask her about it when your hands aren't so pruny. There's something tactile about the work, something grounding. Modern machines spin and rinse and beep, but here you get your feedback directly. Dirt that darkens the water, soap that pulls out oils, cloth that sighs clean under your hands. It's strangely satisfying, and yet, not without its quirks. Take the laundry baskets, for instance. You might think a basket is just a basket, but here they tell stories. A wide-bottomed one like yours means you walked from a village with hilly terrain. Better for balance. Smaller, more tightly woven ones suggest urban laundry, possibly carried by donkey. And if your basket is dyed with ochre, well, that means you've got a child in the household who just started walking. Don't ask why, it's just known. One of the younger girls runs past, shrieking with laughter. She's stolen someone's wet sock, a woolen thing that was probably half felted before it ever reached the river, and holds it aloft like a captured flag. There's no point chasing her. She'll drop it near the drying stones when she gets bored. You smile, let your gaze drift downstream. There's a kind of peace in this simplicity. Laundry, as a task, is eternal, unavoidable. But in this moment, surrounded by rhythmic labor, sun-warmed rocks, and soap that smells faintly of yesterday's fire, it doesn't feel like a chore. It feels like ceremony, a moment suspended in time, woven into the daily lives of communities who never saw a washing board, never heard of fabric softener, and never, ever considered owning a dryer. You settle further into the rhythm now, elbows tucked tight against your ribs, palms pressing fabric to stone, like you've done it 1,000 times before. The river is speaking softly today. Just enough current to carry away the suds, not enough to steal your garments when your attention drifts, which it will, repeatedly, because laundry isn't just about cleaning, it's about zoning out in a controlled, vaguely soapy environment while your hands do the remembering. You pick up the pumice stone next. It's not fancy. Just a chunk of volcanic rock with a perfectly flat edge. Perfect enough anyway. You drag it in gentle, practiced strokes over a pair of deeply creased trousers dyed in faded ochre. The cloth resists slightly at first. Thick cotton always does. But the stone knows its job, and soon it's smoothing out grime that seeped deep into the fibers. Not scrubbing, exactly. More like coaxing. Pumice was highly prized in these parts. Not every region had access to volcanic outcrops, after all, and stones like this were often traded across great distances. Some even came from the Danakil Depression to the northeast, where the earth still hisses and steams with geothermal fury. Those stones were heavier, coarser, and made you feel like you were wrestling a dragon's molar. Yours, though, is soft around the edges, polished by generations. Clay scrapers, though, that's a different game. You reach into your basket again and draw one out. It's curved, like a small crescent moon, and baked in a pit oven until solid. These tools are common here, passed from hand to hand, and almost never made new. They're used for delicates, linens, priestly garments, anything where a stone might fray the weave. You lay out a ceremonial sash now, ivory-colored, with small geometric symbols stitched in red along the edge. It's the kind worn during Mescal, the Feast of the Cross, a celebration marked with bonfires and flower petals and smoke curling into twilight skies. This sash hasn't seen fire or feast in months, and it smells like a cupboard made of old millet and dreams. Carefully, almost reverently, you draw the scraper down the cloth, pressing just enough to pull soil from the weave. It's slow work, soothing work. And just slightly ridiculous when you remember this is literally about cleaning a strip of fabric no wider than a scarf that someone will likely spill honey wine on the next time it's worn. Still, the ritual matters. Across the river, someone lets out a sharp whistle, and you look up. Two women are bickering, good-naturedly, over who got to the flat rock first. Apparently it's the warmest one, the best for drying, and both claim their laundry deserves it more. A nearby child diplomatically throws a sandal at them. Crisis averted. Back to scrubbing. Historians still argue whether the use of dedicated laundry stones and scrapers emerged independently within Ethiopian communities, or were borrowed from Nubian neighbors to the northwest. Some even speculate the knowledge may have trickled down through ancient trade connections with southern Arabia, where similar stones have been found in archaeological sites near pre-Islamic temples. But there's no consensus, just echoes and artifacts. What is certain is this: the tools you use aren't afterthoughts. They're heirlooms, passed down from mother to daughter, aunt to niece, like songs or recipes, or the slightly unfair rules of a local board game no outsider has ever mastered. Some families even decorate their pumice stones with tiny carved notches, symbols only they understand. Protection, blessing, or maybe just a cosmic joke. You set aside the scraper and rinse your hands in the river, watching the ash and clay swirl away like silt in a dream. The sash is clean now, or close enough. You hold it up to the light and smile. It's still got a faint mark from last season's honey festival, but that's part of the charm. History, right there in the fibers. A stain is memory. You wring it gently, the water slapping out in rhythmic droplets, and lay it across a sun-warmed stone. Not the coveted flat rock, obviously. That's currently being defended like a throne, but a decent slab nearby that smells faintly of thyme. The scent probably comes from the crushed herbs used by the last washer. People here scent their laundry stones like it's a spa menu. Lavender, lemongrass, even powdered bark when they're feeling fancy. You lean back for a moment, stretching your fingers. The early sun is higher now, warming your shoulders. The softest breeze glides past, and somewhere behind you someone is shelling beans and humming off-key. It all blends into a lullaby of labor, the kind that keeps you awake just long enough to remember you're alive, but not so long that it ruins the nap you're planning after lunch. Another cloth enters your hands. This one darker, coarser, probably belonging to a laborer or shepherd. It smells like earth and sweat, and long days on dusty roads. The stone greets it with a soft rasp, like an old friend. You smile again, not because it's funny, but because something about this moment feels oddly timeless. This could be any year, any century. Sure, the riverbanks may shift, and dynasties may rise and fall, but someone's always going to need clean clothes, and someone's always going to know just how to get the ash-to-water ratio just right. That someone, today, is you. You roll your sleeves up just a little more. Not that they're offering much protection. The sun's climbing now, and the light shimmers on the water like 100 blinking fish eyes. You squint and keep working. There's still a sizable pile of laundry in your basket, and unless you plan to come back tomorrow, which you don't, you'll need to keep a steady rhythm. Next up, undergarments. Now, let's pause here to clarify. Undergarments in ancient Ethiopian communities were not exactly the lacy, elasticized variety you might be imagining. More often, they were simple linen wraps or thin cotton cloths, sometimes doubled up in colder climates. Modest, practical, and somehow always in need of washing. You pick one up. It's a narrow rectangle, folded and tied with a thin leather cord. It smells like sweat and wood smoke, and you can't help but sigh. This one's going to take effort. You dip it in the water, watching it balloon slightly before sinking. Then you begin the process. Ash, pumice, scrub, rinse, repeat. It's not glamorous, but it's deeply satisfying in a very earthy, humble way. Like mending a hole in your sock or sweeping the last of the rice grains into your bowl. Quiet victories. To help with particularly stubborn stains, you reach for a small pot near the edge of your basket. Inside is a thick paste made from the powdered bark of the wanza tree, mixed with a bit of goat's milk and left to ferment in the sun for 3 days. It smells, how should we put this, distinct, like sour porridge and burnt toast. But it works like a charm on oils and other organic residues. You smear a bit on the cloth, let it sit in the sun for a moment, then scrub again. There's a faint foam, a sort of fizzing sound that tickles the ears. It's weirdly scientific, which is hilarious when you remember you're basically using tree gunk to remove butt sweat. Across the river, someone sneezes, loudly, probably from too much bark paste in the air. You wave sympathetically and go back to rinsing. Historians still argue whether fermented bark paste was primarily used for laundry, or if it started as a skincare remedy that someone accidentally spilled on a tunic. There's evidence of both, but no consensus. What's clear is that the knowledge passed down through generations with very specific instructions. Only ferment it in the sun, one old woman warns. If you leave it in the shade, it turns into soup. No one wants laundry soup. You hang the undergarment to dry on a low-hanging branch of a nearby acacia tree. It's not official drying protocol, but the shade helps preserve the softness of the linen, and anyway the sun's strong enough to dry it in minutes. There's an art to laying things out here. Lighter fabrics need partial shade. Heavier ones benefit from rock warmth. Embroidered pieces are often laid face down to protect the threads. And anything that belongs to a village elder gets placed far from where children can fling mud pies, which happens more than anyone wants to admit. Speaking of children, you spot a trio of them wading through the shallow end of the river. They've built a miniature boat from palm bark and are ferrying laundry scraps across their imaginary kingdom. One of them is wearing a basket as a hat. Another seems to be arguing with a frog. The third is just giggling non-stop, possibly because he's discovered that wet goat hair makes an excellent beard. You can't help but chuckle softly. There's no escaping the chaos, but somehow it never ruins the peace. You return to your pile and lift out a ceremonial tunic, hand-stitched, with faint blue dyes made from crushed indigo leaves. These were usually worn by community leaders, religious figures, or the one person in the village who insists on dressing properly for market day. The indigo is subtle, like a memory of blue rather than blue itself, and the fabric is finer than most. It demands a gentler touch. You swap out the pumice for a worn scrap of enset fiber cloth. It's soft, fibrous, and perfect for polishing delicate garments without unraveling them. You work in gentle, circular motions, adding just a trace of ash paste and whispering a small blessing under your breath. Half tradition, half insurance policy. The scent of the river shifts as you work. A breeze stirs the reeds, carrying with it the smell of distant fires and wild thyme. Someone must be cooking injera, that spongy, sour flatbread eaten with nearly every meal. Your stomach growls. The sun is not the only thing rising. Back at your rock, the ceremonial tunic is looking better, cleaner, brighter. Still, it's not just about appearance. Laundry here isn't vanity, it's honor. It's how you show care for your family, for your elders, for the memory of your ancestors. A clean tunic isn't just a clean tunic. It's a quiet declaration that someone took the time. And you did, you are. There's one last item at the bottom of the basket. A woolen wrap. Coarse, heavy, likely used during travel or cold nights. Wool is tricky. Too much rubbing, and it mats. Too much water, and it stretches. Too little rinsing, and it itches worse than a guilty conscience. You handle it with respect. The river by now has warmed slightly, and your fingers are grateful. You dip the wool, pat it gently, coax out the dirt with the patience of a monk rearranging sand. It's not glamorous work, but it's meaningful, almost sacred. By the time you finish, the laundry stones are beginning to dry in the sun. Most of your garments are now hanging or spread out like a tapestry of local life. Tunics, wraps, sashes, and that one undergarment that's definitely been claimed by a curious goat. You sit back, stretch your arms, and feel a quiet kind of pride. This wasn't just about getting things clean. It was about remembering how people lived, with care, with resourcefulness, and with the kind of stubborn dignity that made even a laundry day feel like part of the divine routine. And honestly, not a single dryer sheet in sight. Your knees creak as you shift your weight. They always do that after a long scrub session, especially on rocks that were definitely not designed with ergonomic support in mind. But you stretch out a bit, shake the last water from your fingers, and peer downriver, where a small group of women are gathered near a narrow bend. Their laughter rises and falls like wind over dry grass. You know that bend. That's the fermentation spot. No, not for beer, though that would be deeply appreciated right now. It's where people soak their cloths in special brews made from roots, herbs, or, in certain cases, aged fruit peels mixed with clay. Fermentation laundry is a whole different rhythm. It's not about removing dirt, exactly. It's about preparing cloth for dye, softening stiff fibers, and sometimes, rather mysteriously, making the fabric less loud. Yes, loud, that's the word they use. Too loud, one older woman might murmur, fingering a tunic that crackles slightly when folded. Soak it in fire root juice and whisper to it. You'd think they were joking. They're not. Today, one of the women at the fermentation spot is stirring something that smells strongly of overripe papaya and iron-rich soil. You've tried that blend before. It leaves linen with a reddish hue and a scent that lingers for days. Not unpleasant, just unforgettable. You pick up a small bag of dried bits from your basket. Inside are the peelings of false banana root and crushed marula leaves, your preferred mix. You walk toward the river bend, feeling the shift in ground as the stones give way to softer earth. This is where fermentation magic happens. Your cloth, just a small prayer shawl, nothing ceremonial, goes into a gourd bowl filled with river water. You add your blend, stir with a carved stick, and whisper the usual phrase, "Drink deeply, sing softly." No one really knows why this phrase is used. Some say it dates back to pre-Aksumite rituals. Others believe it was just something someone's grandmother said once and it stuck. Historians still argue whether the fermentation process was influenced by early textile preservation methods brought from the Nile corridor, or if it developed independently in highland villages. There are petroglyphs in the Tigray region that depict large bowls, women stirring, and steam rising, though whether they're brewing dye or soup remains unclear. Honestly, it could have been both. Your fingers stir the mixture lazily. The water turns cloudy, then murky, then the color of old marmalade. The smell, well, let's say it wakes you up. It's the kind of pungency that suggests something between productivity and danger. You cover the bowl with a flat stone and leave it near the sun to stew. While it ferments, you return to your original spot, now mostly cleared of wet garments, and begin to rearrange things. There's a quiet joy in sorting finished laundry. You stack by size, by fabric, sometimes even by personality. That dramatic aunt who insists on 3 layers of white linen, her items go on the top. The goat herder who never notices missing sleeves? Bottom of the pile. Nearby, an older woman lays out a series of long, vibrantly dyed wraps. Deep reds, rust orange, and pale greens. She notices your look and nods toward her bowl. Pomegranate peel, she explains, and sour grass. You file that away? Good for reds. Another woman adds, and if you want blue to stay blue, soak it under moonlight. Everyone nods solemnly. Is it true? Who knows? But the moonlight soak has been part of laundry lore for as long as anyone remembers. There's even a lullaby about it. Something about the moon brushing the linen with cold fingers so it won't fade. It's oddly beautiful, if slightly impractical. You reach for your last piece to prepare for fermentation. A head wrap made from tightly woven cotton, passed down from your cousin's grandmother's sister, or something equally convoluted. The lineage is less important than the feeling it gives. This wrap holds stories, literally. Small embroidery lines on the edge represent various family moments. A wedding, a successful harvest, the time someone survived a thunderstorm under a leaky hut roof. You soak it gently in plain water first. Not everything needs a pungent brew. The sun is higher now, casting gold through the trees and dappling the stones with heat. You wipe your brow and take a sip from your flask. Honey water, slightly sour, perfectly chilled by the stream. It's the kind of drink that makes you sigh without realizing it. And then, because laundry waits for no philosopher, you return to the fermentation bowl. The mix is darker now, richer, smelling slightly less like compost and more like herbal tea that's been left on a windowsill for a week. You swirl it again, then lift the shawl. It's soft, almost weightless. You rinse it lightly, then drape it over a branch where the breeze can finish the work. Somewhere upstream, a goat lets out a bleating complaint. Probably the same one that stole your soap berries last season. You glare into the distance like a melodramatic villain. The goat, unfazed, continues chewing on a stick. Laundry, fermentation, goat-related vengeance, it's all part of the rhythm here. You pause to look over your handiwork. The mix of textures, colors, and fabrics spread out like a gentle tapestry of domestic mastery. Nothing too fancy, nothing too perfect, but everything clean, loved, and handled with intention. There's something deeply grounding about all of it. You came here with a basket full of dirty fabric, and now, well, you have a slightly less full basket and a riverbank covered in sunlight and drying memories. And that fermented bark paste still smells like defeat and progress at the same time. You wiggle your toes in the warm sand as the last of the shawls hang drying in the trees. The riverbank is quieter now, save for the occasional thud of wet fabric being wrung out, or the splash of a too curious child face-planting into shallow water. All around, there's a quiet buzz of satisfaction, the kind that only comes after hours of scrub, rinse, and mild sunburn. It's time for a break. You settle under the shade of a tall fig tree, your laundry rock finally given a moment's rest. From your bag, you pull a wrapped bit of flat bread, thick and sour with that perfect tang from fermented teff flour. Injera, of course. Even laundry workers need lunch. You rip a corner, dip it in a little pot of lentil paste, and chew slowly, grateful for something that doesn't smell like fermented bark. As you eat, your eyes wander over the others, taking their own breaks. One woman is checking her hands, palms red from scrubbing, fingers wrinkled like old berries. Another is already napping with her head on her laundry basket. Yet another is braiding her friend's hair with nimble fingers, chatting softly about a cousin who's finally gotten engaged after 3 failed attempts. This is the social hour, the reward, the part where laundry day becomes community. Across from you, a group of older women have gathered around a basket, not of laundry, but of herbs and small trinkets. They're preparing a little sachet of talismanic protection for a new baby. It's not laundry, exactly, but it's related. The cloth that wraps the sachet was just laundered that morning. The smell of juniper and eucalyptus drifts over on the breeze. And now comes one of the most peculiar parts of laundry life: blessing the water. Historians still debate whether this was strictly spiritual or just polite tradition, but every few weeks someone brings a small bundle of dried herbs and floats them downstream. It's not about cleaning the river. That would take more than a few twigs. It's about giving thanks. You wash our sweat, you take our dust, the phrase goes. So here's something sweet in return. Today, you've brought your own herb bundle. A modest mix of lemongrass, dried orange peel, and a tiny twist of frankincense. You unwrap it, hold it in your palm for a moment, then let it drift on the water. It twirls like a little boat, sending faint ripples outward. You're not overly superstitious, but you admit, it feels nice. Like you're part of something older than soap. The debate continues on whether this ritual began as a spiritual offering to river spirits or simply a pleasant-smelling form of river etiquette. Some anthropologists suggest it may have originated as a practical means of warding off insects during communal wash days. The truth, as usual, probably lies somewhere in the middle. A child nearby claps their hands as your bundle drifts past. "It smells like my grandma's house," they shout. You nod gravely and reply, "Then your grandma has excellent taste in offerings." With break time coming to an end, you stretch and wander down the bank to collect a few of your drier items. You press your fingers into a wrap to test its dryness. Still slightly damp. You flip it. Then you reach for the ceremonial tunic, which has dried into a crisp perfection. It practically hums with cleanliness, and here comes another ancient challenge: folding. If you've ever tried folding something that was stitched with uneven seams, with no tags or corners to orient you, on a windy riverbank, while keeping a goat from eating the sleeve, you'll understand that this is a skill worth mastering. You start with the easiest: a simple cotton sash. Folded into thirds, then wrapped and tied into a soft knot. Then come the head wraps, shaped into tight spirals, each tucked into the other like fabric cinnamon buns. And finally, the ceremonial tunic. You take your time, lay it flat, smooth the edges, tuck the sleeves in, fold gently, and murmur the same word your grandmother used to say when doing this. Jalila. Folded grace. You never asked why she called it that. But it fits. You stack the clean items carefully in your basket, separating layers with leaves from the false banana plant to keep everything fresh. Some families use acacia leaves. Others sprinkle a pinch of salt between garments to confuse the bad air. You go with what you know. The sun is slipping into mid-afternoon now, casting long shadows on the stones. The laundry crowd begins to thin. Some have packed up and are heading home, baskets balanced expertly on heads, children trailing behind them like sleepy ducklings. Others linger, chatting about politics, neighbors, or the dream someone had last night involving a talking ox and a dancing priest. You gather the last of your things and give your laundry rock a parting pat. You'll be back, probably sooner than you'd like, but before you leave, there's one last ritual to observe: the blessing stone. Near the edge of the trees, half hidden by vines, sits a smooth boulder with a faint carving. Just a handprint, no words. It's said that if you press your palm to the print and make a wish, the river will carry it to the ancestors. You walk over, place your hand on the stone, and close your eyes. You could wish for peace, or rain, or fewer stains next time, or just a longer nap. You whisper nothing, just breathe. The stone is warm, solid, familiar. You lift your hand, adjust your basket, and step back onto the path toward the village, feeling lighter in more ways than one. Behind you, the water glitters like laughter. Your feet trace the well-worn path back from the river, the ground warm beneath your soles, and the weight of the laundry basket a satisfying kind of heavy. The kind that says, "Yes, I accomplished something today." Balanced carefully atop your head, the basket sways just slightly with each step. But your posture, like everyone else's in the village, is practiced and poised, as if you were born with perfect spine alignment and a load of laundry already in your arms. The path curves gently through a grove of sycamore figs and wild coffee bushes, the air now perfumed with earth, sun-warmed leaves, and the lingering tang of damp cloth. You pass others headed in the same direction, some with empty baskets on their way to fetch more, others already singing quiet, walking songs, voices soft and steady like footsteps. And now comes the final phase in the laundry cycle, storage and scenting. You reach your compound, a small circular tukul hut with a thatched roof and low walls the color of wet clay. The doorway is shaded with woven reeds, and a sleepy chicken blinks at you from underneath a wooden bench. Home. Inside, it's cooler and dimmer, the kind of gentle dark that makes you want to nap immediately. You lower the basket carefully, listening to the familiar creak of woven fibers and the soft flutter of fabric settling. The clean smell is strong now. Sun, river, herbs, and something uniquely yours. Storage in your home, as with many others, isn't just a matter of stacking things in a corner. It's a delicate dance of scent, layering, folding style, and smoke infusion. Yes, smoke. You slide a wide, shallow basket from under your bed. It's lined with dried eucalyptus leaves and petals from the cuisur, a native red onion flower with a spicy, almost peppery scent. You place your clean wraps and tunics inside, careful not to wrinkle them. Then comes the incense pot. Tiny and handmade, it's a clay burner barely the size of your palm. You add a few chips of frankincense and a twist of myrrh, light a bit of dried cow dung, and let the smoke curl into the basket. The clothes absorb the scent slowly, each layer touched by the fragrant haze. Historians still argue whether the practice of fumigating clean cloth was spiritual, medicinal, or just a nice flex for house guests. Some say it helped keep insects away. Others insist it infused garments with dignity. You say, why not both? The scent rises, warm and almost sacred, a kind of invisible blessing stitched into the fibers. You close the basket, letting the smoke linger a little longer. Meanwhile, a cousin pokes their head into the hut. They smell like temple clothes, they say with mock reverence. You beam, mission accomplished. Now comes one of the more entertaining rituals of post-laundry life, showing off. You lay out a few select pieces on the low bench near the door, not for drying, but for admiration. It's an open invitation for neighbors, friends, and that one gossip-happy uncle to stop by, casually admire your laundry, and launch into stories of their own wash day victories or woes. Soon enough, the first visitor arrives. An older woman with a laugh that starts before she's even said hello. She examines your fermentation-dyed wrap with approval. That's the sour marula blend, yes? You nod. She sniffs dramatically. Could use more peel. She's teasing, mostly. You offer her a cup of spiced barley tea and settle into the rhythm of post-laundry conversation. Topics include who wore what to the last wedding, who accidentally dyed their linen pink, and who, allegedly, has started adding honey to their rinse water to impress a potential suitor. Yes, honey. Apparently, it makes the fabric shimmer in the right light. Possibly sticky, but undeniably romantic. Your guest leaves after an hour, taking a small sachet of dried eucalyptus with her. A thank you for stopping by. It's customary. You've probably got a basket of such sachets tucked away in the corner. Little gestures go a long way when your community shares water, stories, and the occasional laundry misstep. As the sun begins to dip lower, painting the walls of your hut with warm, golden streaks, you settle back onto the bench and look over your work. There's something meditative about the whole cycle, from soapberry scrub to smoked storage. A ritual, yes, but also a kind of choreography. And now, with everything clean, folded, and fragrant, it's time for the most dangerous part of the evening. Sitting down for just 5 minutes and accidentally falling asleep until tomorrow. You lean back, let your head rest against the wall, and watch the smoke from the incense pot spiral lazily upward. Somewhere nearby, someone's beating grain with a wooden pestle. The rhythm is hypnotic. Thump, thump, thump. Laundry, smoke, tea, gossip, rhythm. You don't need much more than that. And if someone does manage to spill something later tonight, a pot of stew, a cup of tej, a mysterious unidentifiable smear, you'll sigh, grab your soapberries, and head back to the river. But for now, everything is quiet. Everything is clean, and your shawls smell like dignity. You wake the next morning with a crick in your neck, a faint scent of frankincense still lingering in the folds of your tunic, and the tiniest damp patch where a child's thumbprint has mysteriously reappeared. You make a note to investigate that thumb later. Someone's been getting snack-happy near the laundry. But today isn't just about catching rogue fingerprints. Today is for ironing. Well, not ironing in the way you'd picture it. No buzzing electric appliance, no plug-in steamers or fancy spray starch. No, today's ironing will require sunlight, patience, and an assortment of heavy, often random household objects. Across the village, women and men are setting out stones, smooth gourds, and even well-wrapped clay pots onto their clothes to flatten them. You, being a bit more creative, decide to try the wooden pestle from the kitchen. It has a decent weight, and if you angle it right, it won't leave a weird circular dent in the fabric. You lay your chosen garments on a wide, flat board near the garden, one gifted to your family generations ago, its surface sanded smooth by time and use. The cloth flattens under the weight of the pestle. Not perfect, but better than wrinkles. You repeat the process, adjusting and rotating the fabrics like a seasoned chef turning flatbread. And here, under the soft morning light, you perform one of the more mundane yet oddly satisfying steps in the laundry journey. Reshaping. See, after a good wash, certain items, like ceremonial scarves or heirloom robes, tend to warp slightly. A crooked seam, a twisted hem, a stubborn flare in the wrong place. Instead of fighting with needles and thread, you simply re-stretch them by hand. You pull gently at the corners, run your fingers along the seams, and smooth out what your grandmother used to call fabric memory. It's a quiet task, a meditative one. You hum softly as you work. Not a real song, just a tune you picked up years ago, maybe from your mother or someone's cousin or the woman who used to sell herbs near the cattle road. The melody helps you mark the time. There's an art to this part of laundry. Not quite tailoring, not quite sculpting. More like encouraging. Coaxing the cloth back into its best shape, as if the fabric itself remembers how it's supposed to lie. Historians still debate the origins of this reshaping practice. Was it a form of pre-ironing engineering? A response to drying without clotheslines? Or just the result of generations of tactile knowledge passed down with each rinse and fold? The answers are murky, but the process remains, unchanged, rhythmic, gentle. As you finish with the reshaping, you catch a neighbor's child watching you with wide, curious eyes. You gesture for them to come over, hand them a scrap of cloth, and demonstrate the motion. Pull, flatten, smooth. They mimic you, clumsy but delighted, their tiny hands tugging at the corner like it's a piece of bread dough. You're a laundry whisperer, the child says solemnly. You raise your eyebrow, and you're about to wrinkle that if you pull too hard. They giggle and try again. You spend the next hour teaching them your secret tricks. How to align seams using thumb widths, how to press fabric without creasing it in half, how to breathe on the edge of a scarf just enough to warm it before laying it flat. These aren't mystical skills, of course. But they feel that way to a 6-year-old. And maybe a little to you, too. Once the reshaping is done, you begin organizing your textiles into their final destinations. Every household has a different system. Some use carved wooden pegs hung near the door. Others have ceramic pots stuffed with rolled cloths. You prefer your tiered shelves, wooden planks propped up by woven baskets, each labeled in chalk with categories like everyday, ceremonial, visiting aunties, and the very specific, that one blue wrap I never wear but might someday. You stack the freshly reshaped pieces with care, layering them like you're assembling a sandwich. Flat, folded, scented. There's pride in this. A sense that everything has its place. Even that tunic with the strange neckline that only looks good if you tilt your head 15 degrees. Once everything is stacked, you take a step back and survey your work. It's beautiful, truly. And it's here, in this quiet, post-washing moment, that you think about what laundry means. Not just as a task, but as an anchor, a ritual, a rhythm that tells you the week is turning, that the seasons are shifting, that someone is getting married, or coming home, or finally repairing that leak in the roof because you can now safely store dry linens again. You catch yourself smiling at the absurdity of how proud you are of your folded shirts. But honestly, you should be. Outside, the village is slowly stirring into full motion. The pounding of grain, the shouts of children, the lowing of distant cattle, it all blends into a soft morning song. You go outside, sit on the threshold with a cup of tej left over from the festival, and watch a neighbor attempt to balance a towering basket of what is clearly unfolded laundry. You raise your cup in salute. They nod gravely. You are, after all, a laundry whisperer. Later in the day, as the heat begins to mellow and the air picks up its usual hint of dust and sweet smoke, you find yourself lingering near the edge of the compound. Not out of boredom. Laundry may be done, but life rarely pauses. But because today is Laundry Gift Day. It's not an official holiday. No one throws parades or carves it into calendars. But it's understood, shared, and quietly celebrated. The unspoken custom of exchanging cleaned or repurposed textiles with family and friends. One scarf traded here, one tunic mended and gifted there. A social glue disguised as generosity. You retrieve a bundle from the shelf marked Pass Along Cloth. Inside is an indigo-dyed shawl you rescued from the discard pile weeks ago. Someone had spilled millet porridge on it, then sworn it was beyond saving. With a little lemon juice, 2 rinses, and a few strips of smoked banana leaf. You brought it back from the brink. You fold it carefully into a palm-woven wrapper, knotting the ends with thin strips of dried vine. Not too fancy. Just enough ceremony to say, "Hey, I thought of you. And also your laundry habits are not as hopeless as you think." Historians still argue about the significance of textile gifting in ancient Ethiopian communities. Was it tied to status? Marriage prospects? A way to curry favor with influential elders? Or was it simply the easiest way to say, "You smell like frankincense now, and that's a win"? You suspect the truth lies somewhere in between. You walk the bundle over to your aunt's hut, a squat, cool building nestled under a giant acacia tree, and knock twice on the woven door flap. "Oh no," she says immediately, peeking out. "You brought me fabric. I told you I wasn't trading anything else until harvest." You hold out the parcel. "It's a rescue," you say, "and you owe me tea." She opens the bundle, runs her fingers across the now clean indigo weave, and sighs dramatically. "I suppose I could part with a few cloves." Tea negotiations complete, she invites you in. Her own laundry shelves are stacked high and slightly chaotic. Turbans cohabiting with aprons, shawls folded next to dried corn husks. You resist the urge to rearrange. Instead, you sit on a cushion near the stove and sip spicy clove tea while she pulls out a small, patched child's tunic and offers it in trade. It's tiny, obviously outgrown by any human in this century. but the embroidery is beautiful. Spirals of red and yellow thread that dance around the collar like festival lanterns. You hold it gently, the way people cradle things that once held stories. "This belonged to Eo's cousin," she says. "Wore it straight through a rainstorm once. Claimed it kept him dry. Clearly delusional, but adorable." You nod solemnly. "Magic tunic. I'll put it next to the other haunted garments." Your aunt grins. This kind of exchange, clothes that carry memories, laughter, and maybe a suspicious stain or two, is part of the hidden language of laundry in your community. A way of weaving bonds between people who share more than just water sources and soap berries. You leave her hut with a lighter step and a few extra cloves tucked into your wrap pocket. Not bad for a single bundle. Back at your compound, someone is waiting. It's your younger cousin, awkwardly clutching a stack of unevenly folded wraps and looking deeply suspicious of his own skill. I may have shrunk these," he says. You take the stack and examine them. They aren't shrunken, just overly enthusiastic with the banana leaf rinse. Everything smells faintly like mashed fruit salad. "Fixable, you say?" His shoulders drop with visible relief. "Great," he says. "Can I hang out while you do that?" You nod toward the corner of the hut where your laundry bench sits. "If you bring me the pestle, you can watch a master at work." As he scurries off, you begin separating the overly fragrant pieces and laying them out. Banana leaf overuse isn't a crime, it's a rite of passage. Like accidentally washing a chicken feather into your skirt hem or dyeing your socks pink because you misread the indigo ratio. Everyone has their laundry shame story. It's what makes you human. Well, human and occasionally patchy. As you work, your cousin sits beside you, watching intently. You take the opportunity to explain a few things he clearly missed the first 12 times. Do not soak fermented dye fabrics in cold river water. They sulk. Do not store soap berries near the firewood. They explode. And mouthport. And for the love of all that is soft and unwrinkled, never use goat milk as rinse water. He nods with solemn awe. I didn't know laundry had so many rules. You hand him a slightly less fruit-scented tunic. Laundry doesn't have rules. It has consequences. He laughs, and for the next half hour, the two of you work side by side, reshaping, pressing, and chatting. Occasionally a chicken wanders through, pecking at imaginary crumbs. Occasionally you flick a wrinkle with dramatic flair, as if casting out a demon. It's important to keep up appearances. By the time the sun starts leaning toward the horizon again, the banana-scented laundry has been subdued, and your cousin looks vaguely proud of his work. You tell him to start his own pass-along pile. Even if it's small. Even if it's mostly things his younger siblings outgrew. Because Laundry Gift Day is for everyone, even the ones who overfruit their rinse water. The sun begins its descent behind the distant hills, painting the landscape in soft oranges and dusty golds. Shadows stretch across the earth like lazy cats. And you know what time it is. Laundry Storytelling Hour. Not officially, of course, but every laundry veteran knows. When the hands rest, the mouths begin. You settle onto the low wooden stool outside your hut, legs crossed, fingers idly tracing patterns into the dirt. Around you, other families are doing the same, cooling off after the heat, folding their final fabrics, and letting the stories unwind. Tonight, the tale teller is Uncle Tesfaye, a man who's probably folded more garments than you've eaten meals. His voice rolls out like a slow drumbeat, deliberate and heavy-lidded, and you lean back, feeling the hum of his rhythm settle into your bones. Long ago, he begins, when the hyenas still told jokes and people wore grass sandals without blisters, there was a washer named Lemlem who washed the king's underclothes. You're already hooked. You've heard this story a dozen times, but somehow it never gets old. Maybe it's the part about the royal laundry being guarded by horned ibexes, or the bit where Lemlem invents a trick using heated river stones to speed up drying during the rainy season. A technique that historians, yes, real ones, still puzzle over. Was it a myth? A proto-ironing method? or just exaggerated wishful thinking passed down through generations. Either way, the image of Lemlem wrangling regal briefs while dodging royal guards always brings a smile. As the story spins on, you take the opportunity to inspect one last batch of garments, a mix of festival wraps and a very daring yellow tunic someone tried to dye with saffron husks. The result is bold. Not bad exactly, but very bright. It looks like a banana made a life decision. Your cousin returns, plopping down beside you, wide-eyed and still buzzing from the earlier laundry rescue. "Do you think Lemlem was real?" he asks. You pause, folding the banana tunic with exaggerated care. "Probably not exactly as Uncle tells it," you say. "But someone like her? Definitely. Someone had to wash all those royal linens. They don't clean themselves." "Bet she had help," your cousin mutters, already considering the logistics. And you nod. Because that's the quiet truth behind most old tales. There's always a team of uncelebrated hands behind every grand cloak and perfectly pressed robe. People whose names didn't make it into the songs, but whose soap-slick fingers kept society wrapped and decent. You think back to your own laundry lineage, the relatives you never met but whose clever folds and stain removal hacks live on through whispered instructions and half-remembered rhymes. Cold rinse keeps color bright. Dry it flat, not overnight. Classic. You hum the tune to yourself, then begin sorting through the final small repairs. A torn seam here, a fraying edge there. It's common practice to do light mending after a laundry day. Not sewing for fashion, sewing for survival. A loose hem today becomes a ripped tunic tomorrow. You thread a bone needle with flax fiber thread, fingers moving by memory. The stitch you're using, loop and hitch, has been found in burial sites from hundreds of years ago. Archaeologists still argue whether it was developed locally or passed down through trade routes crossing into the ancient Aksumite territories. Either way, it works, and that's all that matters when a shoulder seam is threatening mutiny. Beside you, your cousin attempts his own stitch job on a pair of breeches. You don't have the heart to tell him he's technically sewing the waistband closed. It's not your waistband after all. Let the breeches deal with that later. More voices join the circle as other families drift closer. One woman has brought a calabash of spiced honey water. Someone else is weaving while listening. And you notice 3 children wrapped in identical striped wraps that smell faintly of eucalyptus. Laundry day, it turns out, smells a lot like a forest got politely boiled. Uncle Tesfaye's story hits its peak. Lemlem tricking the king by sewing his initials into the hem of his favorite robe, just to prove she'd washed it faster than the palace guards believed possible. The crowd chuckles. It's the kind of story where the clever woman wins without anyone getting hurt. Your favorite kind. And here, in this quiet gathering of evening light and fading soap scent, you realize something. Laundry in this community isn't just domestic work. It's legacy, culture, subtle rebellion. Shared knowledge passed from hand to hand, like a good stitch or a perfect fold. One of the elders reaches into a bag and pulls out a piece of ancient fabric, carefully wrapped in dry leaves. It's threadbare, the colors faded, but the stitching, the stitching, remains. Tiny, precise loops like a heartbeat, frozen in time. "This belonged to my grandmother," she says, turning it so the firelight catches its delicate weave. "They say she washed it during the famine, made it last 20 extra seasons." You all lean forward, eyes soft. 20 seasons. That's a lifetime for some cloth, a miracle for others. You pass the cloth gently, reverently, from hand to hand. Even your cousin holds it with unusual seriousness. It's a small scrap of fabric, really, but it feels like holding time itself. When it returns to the elder, she folds it again with the kind of tenderness usually reserved for newborns and sacred scrolls. A hush falls, comfortable and full. The stories end slowly. Conversations drift. Someone stokes the fire, someone else gathers bowls, and the scent of herbs and ember smoke thickens in the air. You gather your last tunic, fold it with a sigh, and lean back against the hut wall, eyes half-lidded. There's nothing left to wash today. Nothing left to reshape or mend or categorize. Just the quiet hum of your tired muscles, the satisfied stillness that comes after a job well done, and the knowledge that somewhere out there, Lemlem is smiling in mythic approval. Night has folded itself neatly over the land, and the crickets have started their rhythmic chanting. You stretch your arms behind your head, lying on a woven mat near the threshold of your hut, warm laundry stacked in neat piles beside you. The stars blink awake one by one, indifferent and ancient. It's the perfect moment to reflect on something most outsiders would never expect to connect with laundry: architecture. Specifically, the way homes in your community were designed to accommodate the act of cleaning clothes, drying them, storing them, and even showcasing them. You wouldn't think laundry needed real estate, but here it always has. Your hut, like many others in this region, has a distinct feature you hardly think about. A sun-trap courtyard, walled high with porous clay brick, angled just right to catch the morning light and hold the warmth through midday. You grew up rinsing shirts and shawls in its corner basin, learning early that morning shadows meant cooler water. But by mid-morning, the stones were hot enough to help your wraps dry twice as fast. This kind of structural detail wasn't just lucky, it was intentional. Historians still argue whether the original courtyard designs came first as social centers or laundry stages, but the overlap is too precise to ignore. Some homes even have shallow roof ledges, broad, gently sloping platforms that serve as ideal drying racks when the weather cooperates. You remember scaling those roofs as a child, pinning socks to braided reeds and pretending to be a sky farmer, harvesting sun-dried sleeves. Less fun when a gust blew your uncle's long underwear into the neighbor's stew pot, but memorable. Even inside the huts, architecture makes space for textiles. Carved nooks in the walls store cloth bundles. Hooks made from carved horn or bone hold dyed tunics waiting for festivals. One home you visited, your second cousin's probably, had an entire interior shelf dedicated to just embroidered pillow slips. Dusty? Yes, but glorious. Tonight, you step back into your own hut and light a single beeswax taper. The flicker throws shadows across your laundry tools, your gourd ladle, your bamboo drying tongs, your narrow-shouldered folding board shaped like a giraffe neck. You smile. Functional art. That's what half the tools here really are. Your mother once carved a soap dish in the shape of a lion's paw, just for fun. It didn't work, too shallow, but it looked regal while failing. That's kind of the ethos around here. You start to fold the day's last clean wrap, one corner over the next, pressing each edge just right. Not because anyone's watching, but because your fingers know the rhythm. Laundry here isn't hurried. It breathes. You think of that tiny hut you visited seasons ago in a mountain village. No more than 2 stone rooms and a goat tether. And yet, the owner had made space for a slanted drying wall inside, painted it with ochre, even added little motifs around the nails, stars, birds, possibly a turtle or a particularly optimistic beetle, all for the sole purpose of making laundry feel loved. Because laundry here is not a chore, it's an extension of hospitality. A home where the laundry is cared for is a home that welcomes. You open a small cedar box at the foot of your mat. Inside, dried orange peels, crushed marula bark, and a few tight bundles of aromatic moss. Laundry sachets. You tuck one into your shawl pile and press the lid shut again. The scent hits instantly, earthy and citrus bright, like someone squeezed a lemon into an old tree trunk. You inhale deeply. That'll last a week, maybe 2, depending on humidity. Some elders say the way your clothes smell when they're stored tells people everything they need to know about your character. If that's true, You're currently giving off relaxed citrus elder with excellent boundary management. Good. You reach for your patch box, your emergency stash of decorative scraps and oddly shaped buttons. Not because anything's torn, but because you're in the mood to decorate. That one wrap, plain ochre, a bit too similar to your cousin's, needs flair. You fish out a strip of crimson cloth embroidered with zigzags and stars. From an old cloak you accidentally bleached 5 years ago. Ruined the garment, saved the trim. Classic. You stitch slowly, evenly, the thread making tiny ticking sounds as it pulls through the layers. Outside, the crickets are still at it, now joined by the low gurgle of the cattle settling in for the night. Somewhere nearby, a lullaby hums through the air, soft, melodic, half-memory. As you work, your mind drifts to the layered symbolism of cloth in your world. A simple wrap can indicate mourning, celebration, a promise made, or a journey begun. One community elder used to joke that you could read an entire family history just by going through their laundry basket. He wasn't wrong. You remember a tale about a woman who used coded stitching in her shawls to send messages across the kingdom. Patterns of loops and cross knots only understood by her sister on the other side of the ridge. Romanticized? Definitely. But there's an undeniable poetry in the idea of folded communication, tucked between rinses. Historians, of course, are still arguing about that too. Was it a real language? A coincidence of local style? A couple of particularly dramatic siblings? You lean toward the dramatic sibling theory. More fun. The last stitch in your crimson zigzag goes in, neat and snug. You lay the wrap across your lap and admire it. Now it looks like something worn for a poetry recital, or possibly a bread-making duel. Both valid. You place it carefully in your top stack, atop the sashayed pile. A perfect end to the day's textile adventures. As the taper burns low, you stretch one last time and let your body soften into the mat. Tomorrow, more cloth will get dirty. More dye will need boiling. Some relative will definitely overdo the vinegar rinse again. But tonight, you're content. You're surrounded by softness, by stories, and by architecture shaped, literally and metaphorically, to hold the humble beauty of clean clothes. The dawn arrives slowly, with a hush rather than a fanfare. You blink awake to the faint sound of a gourd ladle tapping against stone, someone already up and fetching water. The sky outside your thatched roof is beginning to lighten into that pale, sleepy blue, the kind that always makes you think of washed cotton left out too long under the sun. You stretch, joints cracking like dry soap flakes, and pull on yesterday's newly stitched wrap. The crimson trim still smells faintly of marula bark and cedar, a gentle reminder of your nighttime handiwork. Outside, the air is cool and moist, clinging to your skin like the inside of a gourd. You head toward the communal stream. Not for laundry, not yet, but to observe something different today. Something stickier. Soap making. In ancient Ethiopian communities, the art of creating soap wasn't just practical, it was borderline magical, or at least heavily ceremonial. You join a small circle near the outskirts of the village, where a group of elders has gathered around a fire. A large clay pot rests above it, steaming slightly, filled with a dark, oily liquid that smells like roasted nuts and something sharper. Ash. You ease into a spot near the back, warm your hands near the flames, and breathe in the alchemy. The main ingredients are familiar. Oil, usually from castor beans, occasionally sesame, and lye water, carefully filtered through fine ash. The ash itself isn't just any random soot. It has to come from specific burned plant matter, fig wood, banana bark, or certain grasses known for producing soft lye, less corrosive and more soothing on the skin. You watch as one of the elders slowly stirs the mixture with a long paddle carved from olive wood. Each motion is unhurried, hypnotic, like coaxing a story out of silence. Someone offers you a pinch of the dried castor beans. You roll them in your palm, feeling their texture. Smooth, with an almost waxy coat. The beans have been pressed for oil earlier, using a stone press that creaks like a sleepy camel. The woman beside you leans in. My grandmother said good soap sings as it boils. You raise an eyebrow, but then listen more closely. And yes, there's a strange music to the bubbles, a series of gentle burps and sighs that rise and fall like a lullaby made by the pot itself. Once thickened, the liquid is poured into hollowed gourds or shallow clay trays to cool. Some soap makers add crushed herbs or dried orange peel for fragrance, though that's usually reserved for special batches. Wedding gifts or coming-of-age wraps. As the group breaks apart, you take a cooled piece of soap in hand. It's rougher than modern bars, but it smells alive. Clean, spicy, herbal. Like nature's idea of a good scrub. You pocket a shard and wander toward the older storage huts. Low structures with thatched eaves and tightly sealed doors. Today, you've decided to take inventory, because what good is clean laundry if it gets tossed in a dusty corner to re-dirty itself? These storage huts are minor engineering marvels, designed to keep out moisture, pests, and, most impressively, cousins with sticky fingers. Inside, the air is cool and dry, scented with old cedar, aged cotton, and a faint trace of mint leaves stored in sachets. The folded fabrics are stacked by purpose. Everyday wraps, ceremonial tunics, rainy season cloths, and a few items so rarely used they've taken on mythic status. Like your uncle's embroidered wedding sash, allegedly worn only once before he tripped into a beehive and declared marriage a mistake. You pick up a thin, linen-like garment known as a shama. Lightweight, usually unbleached, often layered. It was worn by shepherds, farmers, sometimes teachers. The fabric is soft now, aged by years and repeated washing. You lift it to your cheek, still smooth, still carrying the scent of the last sachet it slept with. Dried basil and crushed lavender, most likely. You refold it with care, placing it in a pile destined for re-airing. Even clean cloth needs to breathe every few weeks, or it starts to develop the faint aroma of closed memories. And not the nice kind. In one corner of the hut, there's a tall, narrow shelf lined with long strips of fabric, dyed deep indigo and lined with decorative trim. These are prestige garments, passed down matrilineally, often only worn once or twice a year. You run your fingers along the trim. The embroidery pattern is tight, clean, zigzags and interlocked stars. You think back to Lemlem's story again. The fabled washer who stitched secrets into hems. Could this be one of hers? Probably not. But maybe someone inspired by her. Someone who knew laundry could be a language. You notice one of the indigo wraps has started to fray at the edges. Time and humidity are relentless opponents. You make a mental note to reinforce the hem later with a tighter stitch, maybe double-threaded. It'll hold for another generation at least. There's something oddly satisfying about these quiet maintenance rituals. The mending, the folding, the airing out of both fabric and memory. It's domestic work, yes, but it's also historical preservation. You think of historians again, their fingers brushing papyrus scrolls and stone inscriptions, trying to decode cultures long gone. You wonder if any of them realize how much of history is still folded neatly in storage huts just like this one. Historians still argue whether these textile preservation methods were handed down formally, taught in ceremonies, linked to religious duties, or simply passed along like a good recipe. Probably both. The line between sacred and practical tends to blur when cloth is involved. By the time you step back into daylight, your arms full of soft-smelling shama and patch kits, the sun is well on its way toward noon. You pause to stretch again, the warm breeze lifting the edges of your wrap. Laundry isn't just about soap and water, it's about continuity, about memory with texture, about preserving the softness of time. And just like that, the courtyard calls again. New linens to rinse, new stories to fold, a new afternoon to weave into the quiet, clean rhythm of it all. The sky has deepened into that rich, buttery gold that means late afternoon is settling in. Shadows stretch long across the courtyard, and your hands are damp again, this time from the rinse water of a second laundry batch that refused to wait until tomorrow. Some things never do. You squeeze out a final tunic and drape it over a sun-warmed reed line, then wipe your hands on a drying cloth so well used it practically hums with history. As you fold it into a neat triangle, your gaze drifts across the village, over to the laundry tools shared between homes, scattered like breadcrumbs of tradition. Ancient Ethiopian laundry didn't rely on machines, of course. No metal washboards, no rotating drums, but it didn't need them. Ingenious, handcrafted tools, refined over generations, kept fabrics cleaner than you'd expect, especially considering the rich red dust that seems to settle on everything here, from goats to goat herders. Let's start with the wooden washing mallet. Heavy, blunt, worn smooth by 1,000 beatings. You pick one up from beside the stone rinse basin. Its handle fits your grip exactly, like a shared handshake between generations. Locally, it's called a dereja, and it's used in a rhythmic pummeling technique that's half percussion instrument, half washing ritual. Boom, boom, twist, splash. You've seen grandmothers who could keep tempo better than drummers at a festival. Then there's the laundry fork, a two-pronged stick used to stir soaking fabric in hot, herb-infused water without scalding your hands. You had one shaped like a bird's foot as a child. Lost it when you tried to marinate your school tunic in crushed guava. Spoiler: guava does not remove chalk stains. It does, however, attract bees. Next, the rinsing board. Not ridged like European ones, but smooth, slanted, and slightly concave, made from oil-softened wood or flat, polished stone. You tilt yours now to let the water trickle back into the collection trough. Even that small action feels intentional. Everything here has a rhythm. Even gravity cooperates. Your neighbor, a wiry man in his 70s with exactly 3 shirts he alternates like holy vestments, walks past with a drying pole over his shoulder. The pole is eucalyptus, stripped of bark and slightly bowed with age. It squeaks just a little when he balances it on a frame, then tosses 2 freshly washed wraps across it like flags claiming victory over sweat. "Don't let the wind steal your underclothes," he chuckles, half warning, half memory. You grin and nod. Everyone here has a story about underwear on the run. You glance over at the dye jars tucked into the corner by the fig tree. They're not for washing, technically, but they play their part. After all, if laundry is memory, color is its mood. One large gourd is stained a permanent blue from years of indigo soaks. Another is dusty pink. Hibiscus, maybe. A few jars still bubble faintly, releasing the tangy, fermented scent of old onion peels, which make a surprisingly stubborn yellow dye. Some historians believe tools like these weren't just improvised, but were carefully standardized within communities. Certain shapes passed down, replicated, refined. Others argue it was pure adaptation. Use what you have, shape what you need. The truth, as always, probably lies somewhere in the soapy middle. You kneel beside your own basin now, gently swirling a smaller cloth. One of your cleaning rags, soft as moss and twice as loyal. Your washing paddle, short, wide, and carved with a pattern of stars, is perfect for this. A gift from your aunt on your 13th birthday, as if to say, "Welcome to the age of knowing exactly how long armpit stains take to soak." You remember her laughter as she gave it to you. Some girls get jewelry, you get tools. But she winked. And somehow, that little paddle meant more. You prop it now on the edge of the basin and look across at a more curious contraption. A cloth spinner. Not electric, of course, but a clever wooden rig with rope-pulled arms designed to wring out larger garments without twisting them too harshly. Yours is slightly wobbly. One leg replaced with a mismatched stick. But it still works. Kind of. Laundry tools here evolve constantly. A broken pestle becomes a paddle. A bent awl becomes a hook. Nothing's wasted. Nothing's idle. Even the chipped bowls hold patchwork buttons and bits of string that might someday become part of something beautiful, or at least functional. Just last week, a child showed you a tiny laundry doll made from leftover cotton thread and a seed pod head. She said it helped keep socks from disappearing. You weren't convinced, but hey, your socks have stayed matched all week. Coincidence? As the shadows stretch longer, you stack the tools back into their storage gourd. Yes, even the paddle, even the skeptical doll. You rinse your hands one last time and trail damp fingers along the edge of the dye jar. It's still warm from the sun, and the dye clings to your skin in a soft orange blush. Probably hibiscus or pomegranate. You'll smell nice either way. You pause before heading in. A cool breeze whispers through the courtyard. The laundry lines sway gently, clothes catching the wind like sails on a slow, dream-bound ship. You've always loved the sight. Fabric dancing, tools resting, scent drifting. A quiet scene, but full of memory. Every stitch, every paddle mark, every color and fold. They speak of a people who took the ordinary act of washing and made it a ritual of care, creativity, and connection. And so you step softly toward the hut, humming under your breath, already thinking of tomorrow's load and which tool you'll reach for first. Evening slinks across the village like a lazy cat, settling its weight into the corners of the huts and stretching long shadows through the trees. You pause under the acacia by the northern path, cloth bundle tucked beneath your arm, eyes tracing the slow dance of laundry on the lines. It's the hour when work softens into story, when people gather, unhurried, to share and spin tales with the same hands they use to wring out tunics and scrub away the day. Tonight, your ears perk at the quiet gathering near the grain house. A circle of elders, each wrapped in well-worn cotton, sits cross-legged around a clay brazier, releasing thin wisps of frankincense. Someone laughs softly, probably about a threadbare garment that survived one too many rainy seasons. And you ease into the circle, ready for tales of local laundry legends. And there are many. You're reminded first of Magda, the washerwoman with a memory like a loom. They say she could recall not only the names and owners of every wrap she cleaned, but also the exact event it had been worn to. Births, dances, disputes, and yes, even funerals. She would sing to each cloth as she scrubbed it, a kind of cotton lullaby. It was said garments washed by her carried luck, or at least fewer lice. Magda's favorite trick? Scent stitching. Not literal embroidery, but a method of embedding scents into garments so they'd stay fragrant for weeks. Dried marjoram wrapped into seams, clove pressed gently along collars, lemon peel soaked into the final rinse. When people wore their clothes, the scent would rise with their body heat, like a memory whispering back. Then there was Alamu, the prankster, a tailor by trade, but infamous for his laundering shenanigans. He once tied tiny animal bones into the hem of a chief's tunic so it would rattle faintly during ceremonies. Another time, he dyed an elder's undershirt blue, using indigo meant for festival robes. The elder wore it to market, and spent the day wondering why people bowed to him. Alamu insisted it was a temporary promotion. Of course, no circle would be complete without invoking the legend of Circulum the soap whisperer. She didn't just make soap, she tamed it. She believed every batch of soap had a mood depending on what time of day it was stirred, and who was doing the stirring. Morning soap, good for strength. Afternoon batches, better for mending hearts, or at least cracked heels. Her house was always stocked with jars labeled not by ingredient, but by occasion. For reunions, post-disappointment, pre-dance confidence booster. You lean in as an elder recalls how Circulum once refused to wash her own tunic after a thunderstorm, insisting the storm had given it character. She wore it proudly, speckled with mud, to the seasonal feast. Some said it was fashion-forward. Others said she just liked the smell of rain. And then, there's your personal favorite, Tesfaye the Color Keeper. Tesfaye wasn't a washer, not exactly. He was a dyer, but his role in the laundry lore was crucial. He claimed that each color had a spirit, a mood that needed to be respected. Red needed to be asked permission. Blue liked music during soaking. Yellow refused to be hurried. Tesfaye refused to speak directly while dyeing. He believed words could rattle the pigment, so he hummed. Softly, constantly. Even when chased by wild dogs once, he hummed the whole way. People swore his blues were deeper, his reds richer. The fabrics dyed in his vats shimmered slightly under moonlight. And while some modern historians dismiss this as optical illusion or trick of humidity, villagers remember it differently. They say his cloths carried light, like stars woven into cotton. Historians still debate whether figures like Tesfaye and Circulum were real individuals or composite legends built from many people over generations. But the stories remain, stitched into the rhythm of washing and retelling. You listen to the fire pop and crackle as a younger voice pipes up with a new tale. This one's more recent, about a boy who tried to invent faster drying using goat breath and a bamboo funnel. It failed spectacularly, but the goats smelled fabulous for a week. Everyone laughs gently, the way people laugh when the air is warm, and bellies are full, and no one is in a hurry to sleep. You glance down at the wrap across your knees. Faint embroidery curls along the hem, a pattern you didn't notice before. A star beside a leaf, repeated in a steady line. Maybe your cloth holds its own story. Maybe it was touched by one of these legends, or their apprentice. Maybe it carries a bit of humming dye, or a trace of marjoram tucked where no one sees. A warm breeze drifts through the courtyard, carrying the scent of frankincense and faintly soapy hands. Someone begins to hum. Low, rhythmic, like the churn of laundry in a wide stone basin. You join softly, not knowing the tune, but feeling the rhythm. It's the kind of sound that seeps into cloth. The kind that turns daily chores into memory. The kind that lingers long after the fire dies. You wake to the gentle hush of dawn. No rooster this time, just the soft click of morning pots and the whisper of wind threading through your window mat. The village breathes slowly, lazily, and yet you know the laundry will already be underway. You pad across the packed earth courtyard and catch your neighbor. Yes, the same three-shirt sage, already wringing a long strip of cloth with the precision of a man who's done this dance 1,000 times. His bucket is steaming, water scented with crushed eucalyptus leaves and something else, maybe lemongrass. He glances up with a knowing grin. Today's rinse is for balance, he says. Balance. You nod, even though you're not sure what that means. Maybe the cloths themselves know. As you set up your own basin for the morning wash, you begin thinking about how laundry isn't just a daily necessity. It's woven deep into the social fabric, literally and metaphorically. In ancient Ethiopian communities, washing was a site of social exchange, silent politics, and subtle acts of rebellion. Take, for instance, the quiet rules of who got to wash where. The central courtyard basin was communal, but positioning mattered. Elder women often took the shaded corners, symbolic seniority, yes, but also practical wisdom. No one wants a sunburn while scrubbing linens. Younger folk were expected to start at the outer rim, only moving inward as they proved their diligence and possibly their gossip worthiness. Because, let's be honest, laundry time was prime gossip hour. You didn't just wring out shirts. You wrung out stories, confessions, maybe even a prophecy or two. Someone always had a cousin who saw a spirit by the river. Someone else once spilled indigo over a borrowed shawl and tried to pass it off as the new royal dye. Word spread faster than rinse water on sandstone. Laundry also became the unofficial town archive. A stain told a story. A patch hinted at a fight. A mended tear near the hem. Likely tripped over something while dancing or running. Everyone could read the fabric if they knew the code. And then there was the silent hierarchy of tools. A woman who showed up with a carved washing paddle meant business. But one who brought a sandalwood-handled paddle passed down through 4 generations? That was social capital. You knew better than to borrow it, unless your situation involved both a family curse and a formal apology. In fact, borrowing laundry tools had its own etiquette. You didn't just grab someone's paddle. You made an offering, a sprig of mint, a fresh egg, maybe even a song. Borrowing without offering? Social suicide. Worse than showing up to the market with unwashed linens. One story still floats around about a young man who tried to impress a girl by using her family's prized laundry stone without asking. When he returned it, the family discovered he'd chipped the edge. The stone had been in their clan for 3 generations. The elders made him do everyone's laundry for a month, using only his hands and cold water. To this day, his nickname is 10 Fingers. Some historians argue these small rituals around tools helped maintain community order. In the absence of formal legal systems, these gentle codes reinforced respect, responsibility, and the value of labor. Others suggest it was more about storytelling, that the tools were props in a play everyone knew by heart. Either way, the tools became more than tools. They were characters. And of course, there were the rebels. Laundry wasn't always done the right way. Some people took shortcuts, soaking without scrubbing, rinsing with cold water even when hot was available. Scandalous. One woman once used river clay as a scrub agent instead of soap. People clutched their tunics in horror. But when her whites came out cleaner than the chief's linens, well, suddenly river clay was trending. There were also those who ignored the rotation order. Usually folks followed an unspoken schedule. Families had their day, their time slot, their basin preference. But every so often, someone decided their laundry couldn't wait. Maybe it was rain coming, maybe a social function, maybe just spite. Either way, you could cause a quiet uproar by soaking your cloth too early or leaving it too long in the rinse trough. And don't even start with hanging spots. A particular pole, baked just the right way by the sun, was prime drying real estate. People casually lingered near it, cloth bundle in hand, hoping its current occupant would leave. Others sent children to claim it early, tiny spies trained in the fine art of towel deployment. It wasn't war, it was laundry. Still, the emotional stakes could get surprisingly high. You recall one elderly woman who reportedly stopped speaking to her neighbor for an entire planting season over a disputed washing paddle. A resolution was finally brokered by the local weaver, who gifted them both matching cloths dyed in peacemaking shades, blue and gray. Their truce was sealed with a shared rinse session and a slice of fermented honey bread. You return to your own washing now, gently rolling the cloth against the basin wall, foam slipping between your fingers. The air smells faintly of citrus today. Someone nearby is using lemon peel again. You make a mental note to try that next week. The cloth hisses as you wring it out, water dripping like a soft drumbeat onto the stone. You pause, listen. Around the village, the same sounds echo. Hands slapping cloth, paddles thudding, voices rising in quiet, companionable song. You realize that the act of laundering has never just been about cleanliness. It's been about continuity, a way to assert presence, to say, I was here, I lived, I spilled sauce on this tunic, I scrubbed it clean, I will do so again. It's a rhythm, a ritual, a rebellion sometimes. But above all, it's a deeply human thing. This act of lifting dirt from fabric and, in doing so, keeping memory from fading, you wring the last cloth, shake it gently, hang it high. And as it flutters in the breeze, you can almost hear it whisper its story back to you. The afternoon sun leans lazily overhead, throwing gold across the hills, baking the earth into soft warmth beneath your toes. You stretch your arms, letting your shoulder blades crack like dry leaves. It's that slow part of the day. Too late for serious washing, too early for dinner. Which, as every seasoned villager knows, is prime time for fiber talk. Yes, fibers. Because no laundry tale is complete without unraveling, pun very much intended, the story of the fabrics themselves. You sit beneath the wide-bellied sycamore, cloth still damp across your lap, and let your fingers follow the weave. This one's tight, tighter than your usual. Woven by an expert hand. Maybe from that weaver down by the old well who always insists on humming 3 specific bird songs before starting her loom. Superstition? Maybe. But her cloth holds together better than most, even after a dozen hard scrubs. The base material? Likely cotton. But not just any cotton. This is Gossypium herbaceum, a strain that historians trace back thousands of years across East Africa. Native, drought-tolerant, and stubborn in just the right way. It's the quiet hero of Ethiopia's textile story. Cotton farming here wasn't an afterthought. It was tradition. Passed down like family recipes and fire-starting songs, harvesting cotton was a delicate affair. You plucked only what the wind opened. Anything forced from the bowl lost its soul, or so said the elders. And then there was ginning. Not a loud, industrial affair, but a patient, finger-splitting task using small hand tools, wooden sticks, or bow-stringed gins that twanged like melancholy instruments. Spinning came next. No spindles with corporate logos, just a smooth stick, often carved from bamboo, and your grandmother's rhythm. Right hand pulls, left hand twirls. You twist as if coaxing a story from fluff. Some people sang while spinning. Others told riddles. A few just stared blankly ahead, lips pursed, completely hypnotized by the dance between fiber and thought. Historians still argue whether spinning duties belonged more to women, older children, or traveling tradesfolk. But in practice, everyone spun at some point. You'd be surprised how many love declarations happened over clumps of cotton. Nothing says, "Marry me," like offering someone your best hand-spun thread. Then came weaving. And now things got serious. Traditional Ethiopian looms, known as horizontal treadle looms, weren't for the impatient. Wooden, heavy, and hand-built, they required a curious kind of choreography. You sat, you rocked, you pressed your feet to guide the warp. You threw the shuttle back and forth like a slow-motion game of catch. Some weavers claimed they could feel the cloth forming before they saw it, like building a road with your eyes closed, one step at a time. And just when you thought weaving was intense, here came the patterns. You see, it wasn't enough just to make fabric. It had to mean something. Colors weren't chosen at random. White, yes, for purity, used in formal wraps and funerals. But red had stories. It could mean power, passion, protection, or stay away, I'm not in the mood. Blue was for peace, often worn after arguments to signal calm. Yellow? Bright, celebratory, perfect for festivals or forgiveness. And the patterns, oh, the patterns. There was the eyes of the lion, a zigzag that warned enemies and attracted admirers. The rolling hill pattern meant you came from the lowlands. Tiny diamond clusters meant you were from the weaving towns east of the river. One cloth could hold your biography if you knew how to read it. You glance at the wrap still drying by your side. You count 4 thin red lines running parallel at the border. A weaver once told you that meant 4 generations strong. Whether that's true or not, who knows? But it feels good to believe. And of course, there were the materials beyond cotton. In the highlands, coarse sheep wool was sometimes blended into winter tunics. Not for elegance, but for survival. You haven't lived until you've tried sleeping through a mountain night with only linen between you and the wind. Wool may itch like regret, but it traps heat like a loyal friend. There's even oral history, though debated, of garments woven with fibers from agave or enset plants. Tough, scratchy, but durable. These were work clothes, meant for laborers who scrubbed floors or hauled grain, not festival dancing. Even rarer, in pockets of southern Ethiopia, fibers from wild flax and imported silk were used by wealthy or royal families. Silk. In a land of dust and drums, it arrived in caravans, sometimes carried in the mouths of traders to keep it safe. Imagine smuggling luxury between your teeth. But of course not all clothes were born equal. Some were reused endlessly, washed, patched, passed down, re-dyed, repurposed. A festival robe one year could become a baby sling the next, and by decade's end, perhaps a dust cloth with a legacy. Others were buried with their owners, swaddling the dead in familiarity. A kind of fabric farewell. The best part? Every cloth had a sound. A hush when it folded, a sigh when wrung, a flutter when caught by wind. Some said you could tell the weave just by the way it rustled, so you close your eyes for a moment, listening to your wrap breathe beside you. It whispers of spinning fingers, of foot-pressed looms and dye pots filled with patience, of a grandmother who stitched stories into the hem, and a weaver who hummed lullabies to the shuttle. And as the breeze lifts again, carrying the scent of sun-baked cotton and something faintly herbal, you smile. Because laundry here is more than clean cloth. It's memory in motion, a history that wraps around you, warm, worn, and wonderfully alive. The sun is beginning its slow descent now, casting long, sleepy shadows across the fields. You wander along the edge of the village, wrap tucked loosely around your shoulders, and find yourself drawn toward the open hillside, where garments flutter like sleepy flags on their drying lines. They wave at you lazily, these clothes, as if they've just woken from a nap, and are considering whether it's worth moving at all. This stretch of land, sun-kissed, breeze-laced, oddly peaceful, is known to the villagers as the drying grounds. Not because they lacked imagination, but because it was simply the place to dry laundry, flat, open, and always kissed by the wind that came tumbling down from the mountains like a playful child. You step carefully between laid-out tunics and long scarves pinned to wooden frames. The cloth speaks in whispers as you pass, linen murmuring over gravel, cotton sighing into the grass, wool grumbling in thick, damp defiance. It's like walking through a dream woven in laundry. And here, on these grounds, the art of drying becomes its own quiet science. You spot a cluster of older women standing beside what looks like a low wooden pyramid wrapped in fabric. They're discussing something intensely, arms waving in slow theatrical arcs. One of them glances your way and says, "Don't let the fabric hear your doubts. It'll wrinkle in spite." You smile politely, unsure whether that's a proverb or a very specific warning. Drying methods in ancient Ethiopian communities weren't just a matter of convenience. They were finely tuned rituals, combining climate, time, and local plant knowledge to ensure the fabrics didn't just dry, but aged well. A badly dried cloth could stiffen, warp, or worse, invite mold. A well-dried cloth, however, practically smiled when you touched it. Some fabrics were laid flat across stone slabs, sun-warmed and smooth. Others were hung from acacia branches or draped over tightly bound ropes made from enset fibers. And the prized ones? They were air-dried in shade, protected from direct light with sheer cloth canopies that filtered the sun like a lens. Because as everyone knew, some dyes fade faster than secrets. Historians still argue whether sun-drying was more about practicality or ceremony. Was it simply the most efficient method? Or did people believe sunlight carried cleansing properties? Some oral traditions suggest the latter. The sun, after all, was often spoken of in familial terms. Grandfather sun, gentle but firm, keeper of truth and temperature. Letting your linens bask under his gaze was like airing out not just fabric, but conscience. And then there was wind drying. Oh, the dance of the wind. On especially breezy days, villagers would clip cloth to long lines strung between homes and trees, creating a tunnel of flapping robes and snapping sleeves. Children ran between them, pretending the garments were ghosts or guardians. Adults, meanwhile, adjusted angles and added weighted stones to corners, ensuring no fabric flew away mid-rinse rebellion. One story still floats around the village about a wedding tunic that took flight during drying. The bride chased it for half a mile before it landed in a river, perfectly folded. They took it as a sign. The marriage would be full of unexpected grace. And by all accounts, it was, though the couple did end up living in a house with no roof, which may or may not have been related. For scented freshness, many families placed herbs and crushed flowers beneath the cloth as it dried. Lemongrass was a favorite, but sage, basil, and even powdered bark were used too. You walk past one drying setup now and catch a waft of something minty mingled with eucalyptus. The effect is calming, almost medicinal, like standing inside a sigh. Nearby, someone's used a thick slab of porous rock as their drying base, its surface still warm from earlier sun. The fabric laid atop it has dried into perfect crispness, and when the owner lifts it, it crinkles like parchment. It's oddly satisfying. You remember now the rules of drying rotation. Just like the wash basins, drying spots were often governed by unspoken rules and neighborly pecking orders. If your family was known for excellent dyes or extra thorough rinses, you might get prime space at the slope's crest, where wind met sun in perfect balance. Lesser dried offenders, those who left soap residue or neglected the rinse, were gently nudged to the shade. And when drying season hit its peak, usually during the post-rain bloom, there was almost a festival air. Dozens of fabrics flapping, people calling out across the field, checking wind speeds like amateur meteorologists. The cloth became a canvas, the land a gallery. Once a year, they even held a contest, Best Cloth Drying Performance. Entire families participated. Points were awarded for speed, smoothness, fragrance, and bonus marks for innovative drying rigs. One memorable entry involved a rotating bamboo frame powered by goat tugs. It collapsed within minutes, but earned a solid honorable mention for audacity. You reach the end of the drying field and sit beneath a tree. Above you, a half-dried shawl flutters. It belongs to the baker's daughter, known for her spiced honey rolls and impeccable pleat lines. The fabric smells faintly of cinnamon and charcoal, a kitchen-scented lullaby. As your eyes begin to grow heavy in the late-day sun, you watch as the cloth around you continues its quiet ballet, rippling, waving, stretching like sleepy dancers. There's a serenity to it, this whole process, a rhythm born of heat and patience. No spin cycles, no dryer buzzers, just time and wind and sun. The same forces that shape cliffs and whisper to trees now finish their gentle work on linen. You breathe in. You let the warmth of the earth press into your back. And somewhere in the distance, you swear you hear someone say, "Don't fold too soon. It's still dreaming." Evening has arrived. That perfect hour when the light turns soft and gold, and the smell of dinner fires begins to sneak through the village paths. You stretch, arms reaching above your head, and start gathering up the now dry fabrics. They crinkle a little in your hands, sun-kissed and obedient after their long airing. But before you fold the last one, something else happens. Something you've been looking forward to all day. Laundry storytelling. You see, in this community, folding laundry isn't just a chore. It's a performance. A chance for elders, cousins, neighbors, and children to sit together, cloth in hand, and swap stories like trade goods. The fabrics become props, illustrations, even characters in tales of love, mischief, heroism, and questionable judgment. You settle onto a mat, a cotton scarf draped over your lap. Others gather around you, one woman cradling a pile of undershirts, a boy still holding a damp sock, and an old man who, for reasons unclear, has brought an entire curtain and nothing else. A girl beside you starts it off. "Did I ever tell you about the time the priest's laundry turned blue?" Everyone groans in affection. Yes, they've heard it, but that doesn't matter. The retelling is part of the fun. Turns out, a young novice, new to both prayer and pigment, accidentally tossed a fully dyed kuta into the communal basin. By the next morning, every sacred robe had taken on a suspicious turquoise tint. The next Sunday, the priest addressed the congregation in what looked like a festival outfit. The moral of the story? Always check your rinse water for secrets. Historians still argue whether this tradition of storytelling over cloth folding is formally ritualized or simply habit. Some anthropologists say it evolved to make dull work pleasant. Others insist it served as an oral record-keeping method, encoding lessons, warnings, and humor into the humdrum of domestic life. Whatever the origin, one thing's clear. The stories stuck, and they weren't just about laundry mishaps. There were tales of warrior cloaks that turned away arrows, of love letters sewn into seams, of a woman who won an oxen race while balancing a basket of folded napkins on her head. True? Probably not. Entertaining? Absolutely. You shift to fold a tunic. 4 square creases, sleeves in, hem folded to meet the collar. As you do, the old man clears his throat and begins another. "This one," he says, holding up his single curtain like it's made of gold, "was from the time my brother tried to dry our mother's undergarments on the roof." There's laughter already, because everyone knows this tale ends in a chase involving 2 chickens, a kite, and a very flustered neighbor. But no one interrupts. It's tradition to let the teller spin it fresh each time. In between stories, there's a rhythm to the folding. Flat on the mat. Smooth the corners. Shake out the stiffness. Press it gently under your palm, like sealing a secret inside. Some people use a quick, practiced method. Others, especially the elderly, fold like they're performing a final rite. Deliberate, thoughtful, reverent. You try your best to match the old woman beside you. She folds each cloth so precisely it looks like a square of light when she finishes. She pats your pile once and mutters, "Too soft. Fold with intention." There's no arguing with that. Some families even had special folding songs, low, rhythmic hums with nonsense syllables meant to keep the pace and entertain toddlers. One version goes, "Sholo lolo, fold and rolo, don't wake the cat, don't fold too flat." No cat was ever actually involved, but it does have a nice cadence. Folding became a skill of pride. Young people practiced just to impress elders. Marriage prospects were sometimes judged by how crisp your pleats were. Good hands, good home, the saying went. Though one could argue that measuring life partners by towel symmetry has its risks. And then, of course, there were the prank folds. Tucking a pebble into a folded shirt, hiding tiny dried chilies in an enemy's handkerchief, folding a tunic backwards, and waiting for someone to put it on and look like a confused scarecrow. Harmless, silly things, but capable of causing minor village legends. One man still insists a misfolded cloth was what made him trip during a dance contest. My right leg didn't know where to go, he claims solemnly. Folding, like most parts of laundry life here, was both personal and communal. You folded for yourself, yes, but also for the person who might wear the cloth next. You folded with care so others would feel respected. You folded to mark transitions, a child's first robe, a widow's mourning wrap, a traveler's departure scarf, and occasionally folding became protest. Once, when a tax collector doubled the levy on dyes, the entire village folded their clothes inside out and wore them backwards. The result was a week of confused expressions, tripping over hems, and the local goats running in panic at the sight of inverted skirts. But it worked. The tax was lowered. Symbolism triumphs again. You fold your final piece and glance around. The piles are tidy now, some cloth still warm from sun and story. People begin to rise, stretch, and carry their bundles home. The old man tucks his curtain under his arm and winks. Next time, he says, I'll bring the whole window. The air smells of cumin, pine smoke, and a bit of lavender left in someone's rinse water. And somewhere, far off but still reachable, a drum starts tapping. Not for war, not for warning, just to remind the world that dinner is near and stories never truly end. You gather your bundle close to your chest, feeling its gentle weight, and make your way home. The cloth is folded, but its stories are still wide open. The sun has mostly set now. A few lingering pink streaks stretch across the sky like spilled dye on cloth, and the world slips into that soft blue hour when shadows blur and the village begins to hum with quieter rhythms. You move slowly now, carrying your neatly folded laundry like a basket of finished thoughts. But even after the washing and drying and folding is done, the work of laundry isn't quite over yet. Because now, it's storage time. And in this community, storing laundry is not just about finding a place to shove your extra tunics. It's about preservation, fragrance, accessibility, and, yes, just a touch of superstition. You walk into a nearby home, welcomed by the earthy scent of pressed soil floors and woven grass mats. Your feet shuffle gently so as not to disturb the straw tucked into the corners. The matron of the house leads you to the storage corner, where a long, low basket sits under a sloped window. This is no ordinary basket. It's woven from palm fiber and acacia bark, tightly coiled, and sealed with a lid that creaks when she lifts it. Inside, layer upon layer of perfectly stacked, wrapped, and scented garments. It's less like a laundry chest and more like a memory archive. You lean in. It smells of clove and cedar wood, with a faint whisper of toasted grain. Ancient Ethiopian households treated storage as a form of protection, not just from dust or insects, but from time itself. Certain fibers, like cotton, were especially vulnerable to mold in the wrong humidity, while wool could become stiff or attract unwelcome nibbling from moths or the occasional overconfident rodent. So storage was strategic. Linen garments were wrapped in light cotton sheets dusted with powdered basil or charcoal ash. Delicate embroidery was swaddled in dyed silk scraps, usually the ends of torn festival garments. Recycling, but with style. One woman proudly lifts a folded wrap and points to the stitching. My grandmother embroidered this, she says. We store it in peppercorn oil and eucalyptus bark. You raise an eyebrow, wondering how something can smell both spicy and refreshing at the same time. But it works. The wrap is soft, vibrant, and carries no hint of its age. And here's a curious fringe fact. Some families hung their finest garments from the rafters instead of tucking them away. It wasn't laziness, it was tradition. Hanging clothes allowed air to circulate and prevented creases, yes. But more importantly, it showed off the family's textile prowess. Guests could literally look up and admire your best shirt. Historians still debate whether this practice was a sign of pride or a form of household hospitality. Let them see what keeps us warm, one village proverb goes. Others argue it was more practical. Less chance of mice if your cloak is dangling overhead. Storage containers varied, too. In wealthier homes or royal households, carved wooden chests were common, inlaid with shell or metal filigree. These chests often doubled as dowry holders, with each garment a kind of textile diary. One chest could contain the story of a woman's entire adulthood, the tunic from her first trade, the shawl worn during childbirth, the ceremonial wrap gifted to her on her mother's death. Fabric became a biography, one that didn't need ink. You peer inside one basket and see small paper tags attached to each bundle. Not actual paper, tree bark smoothed and inked with charcoal symbols. A rudimentary labeling system. Market cloth, wedding shawl, mystery tunic we think belongs to cousin Habte. Then there's the great laundry rotation. Every month, households would unstack their stored clothes and rotate the piles, bringing older items to the top to ensure even wear. Nothing was allowed to languish in the basket bottom for too long. Mold, after all, is the enemy of nostalgia. Some families turned this into a miniature ritual, burning a sprig of incense, refolding each piece, saying a quiet blessing like, "May this cloth serve well and return unstained." It's a bit like rotating canned goods in a pantry, only with more spiritual gravitas and fewer expiration dates. Storage wasn't limited to clothing, either. Laundry bundles often included family linens, ceremonial wraps, and woven cloths used during mourning or birth. These had their own storage taboos. For example, cloths used in funeral rites were never stored near celebratory ones, just in case joy and sorrow rubbed off on each other. Fabric karma, if you will. And then there's the question of who gets to do the storing. In most households, it's a task entrusted to a particular person, usually the eldest woman, or whoever had the best cloth memory, meaning she could remember who owned what, when it was last used, and which wrap was for what occasion. It's a mental catalog of color, texture, and family trivia. You watch as tonight's folded load is added to the stack. A few garments go into a chest, layered between fresh lemongrass leaves. One is wrapped loosely in a blue cloth and placed on a shelf near the window, drying a little more in the moonlight. A final shawl is gently rolled into a cylinder and tied with twine. That one's traveling tomorrow. And yes, there's superstition here too. Some villagers believe that folding garments too tightly traps energy. Others insist that loose bundles attract forgetfulness. One particularly niche belief involves placing a small stone atop the top garment to weigh down mischief. You see one now, a smooth river rock painted with concentric circles, sitting like a sleepy sentinel on a folded shirt. You lean against the doorway, listening to the rustling of cloth, the occasional laugh, and the soft clink of lids closing over laundry baskets. The air is thicker now, filled with scent and stories, and the quiet pride of a day's labor carefully tucked away. It's not flashy, it's not glamorous, but it's everything. A life folded gently, stored with care, wrapped in wisdom and eucalyptus, and somehow you feel it too. The way the cloth rests easier, knowing it's been seen, appreciated, and put exactly where it belongs. It's long past nightfall now. The stars, thousands of them, twinkle overhead, strung across the sky like hand-stitched beads on a royal garment. The air is cooler, tinged with the hush of nearby crickets, distant drumming, and the soft murmur of fireside talk. You find yourself sitting by one of those fires, not to work, not even to rest, but to listen. Because now it's time for reflection, and for the stories within the cloth itself. In this community, every piece of laundry carries memory. Not just what happened to it, but what it witnessed. A shirt is not just a shirt. It's the shirt your uncle wore the day the rains came early. That scarf? The one your mother tied around her waist when she raced the market boys for a basket of bananas and won, slipping once, laughing twice. Laundry, in this sense, becomes a kind of soft archive. One that you fold, store, and sometimes whisper to. Tonight, around the fire, someone passes you a pale blue wrap with faded embroidery. You run your fingers along the pattern, zigzags in sunset colors, softened with age. That belonged to Auntie Saba, someone says. She used to dance until her knees gave out. The wrap smells of sage and lemon balm. You close your eyes and imagine her, spinning in it, heels dusty, braid flying behind her like a comet. A quiet little eulogy wrapped in linen. This idea of textile memory isn't exclusive to Ethiopia, of course, but here it's especially poignant. Historians note that in many ancient Ethiopian communities, oral storytelling often used physical objects as anchors. And what better anchor than a piece of cloth that's been carried, worn, washed, and mended 100 times. There's one story about a mother who stitched a tiny blue cross into every garment her son wore. Just one cross, always near the hem or cuff. She never told him about it until the day he left to trade camels across the desert. "So you're never alone," she said, pressing his hands. "And if the cloth comes back without you, it still remembers." Your throat catches a little at that. Not all stories are that sentimental. Some are delightfully ridiculous, like the famous pants incident. A man, probably a bit too proud of his tailoring, stitched a pair of trousers with hidden pockets in the waistband. Not for coins, not for snacks, but to smuggle in extra dice during a gambling match. The pockets worked, until he sat down too fast and the dice spilled out onto the table in front of everyone. He still claims they were emergency marbles. Some wraps were painted or inked with messages too. Not full sentences, but symbols. A fish to mark fertility, a star for guidance, a crescent for healing. These weren't always visible. You had to know where to look. Behind a sleeve, under the hem, like wearing a secret. One cousin claims to have owned a scarf that changed color in the rain. The practicality of this is questionable. More likely, it was dyed with a reactive plant pigment that darkened with water. But still, it sounds magical. And what is memory, if not a little magic? There's also the tradition of message knots. Imagine you're away from home, perhaps fetching salt or helping herd cattle. You find a bundle of laundry sent from your family, and tucked inside is a cloth that's been folded in an unusual way. 3 folds left, 1 right, tucked under twice. That pattern means everything's fine, but come soon. Another pattern, rolled once, folded thrice, tied with twine, means we miss you and the goat is loose again. These weren't universal codes, mind you. Each family had their own. But they worked. And they helped. Historians still argue whether these folding codes had pre-written standards or were developed organically over time. One theory suggests they began as simple mnemonic devices. Fold it this way so I don't forget what it's for, and slowly turned into a communicative system. There's a growing interest among modern textile scholars in reconstructing these codes. Some even attempt to catalog them, though many families guard the meanings like recipes. It's not just about decoding the cloth, It's about respecting the emotional encryption inside it. And then there's mending. Ah, yes. Not all memory is about preservation. Some is about repair. Here, mending isn't just maintenance. It's storytelling with a needle. A torn sleeve is not just fixed. It's patched with a scrap from your father's old shirt. A hole in a scarf becomes a stitched star. A frayed hem is not cut off, but bound with dyed thread in a spiral, adding character, not erasing damage. One elder says, "Every stitch adds years to a cloth's soul." And you believe her. You lean back on your elbows, gaze into the fire, and think of all the garments you've handled today. Washed, dried, folded, stored. How many stories did you touch without realizing? How many whispers live in the seams? One child tugs at your sleeve and hands you a small square of fabric. It's clearly old, worn soft like river stone. In the corner is a patch shaped like a tiny house. "That's for sleeping," the child says. "We sew them into bedtime cloths so dreams don't get lost." You nod slowly and smile. A bedtime stitch for holding dreams. Who needs a lullaby when you've got that? And as you sit, warm and drowsy, the night thick around you, you feel the presence of 1,000 folded memories humming gently inside their baskets. Safe. Remembered. You're not just doing laundry. You're touching time. Morning peeks through the trees again, slow and golden, like it's been politely waiting for you to stir. Birds chirp. Not the energetic kind, more like sleepy feathered neighbors shuffling about in the trees, clearing their throats. The scent of last night's fire still lingers, faint and smoky. And before you've even risen, someone nearby has already started on the day's washing. Yes, again, because laundry never ends. But today is different. Today, you're joining a group on a special outing. A trip to the river's far bend, known for its mineral-heavy waters and smooth washing stones. It's a kind of communal wash day, something halfway between a practical errand and a social ritual. Everyone brings their finest soap berries and best gossip. You shoulder your bundle and walk the winding path. Along the way, someone hands you a strip of dried mango. For the journey, they say, though it's not far. Still, chewing it makes you feel like a seasoned traveler. When you arrive at the river bend, it's like walking into a secret garden of laundry lore. Smooth granite boulders line the edge, some polished by generations of hands and fabric. Small pits have been carved over centuries by repetitive pounding, scooped into little cradles that now hold water and foam like soapy moons. And today's twist? The elders are teaching a special technique, mineral soaking. You watch as a grayish powder is sprinkled into wooden bowls. It's not soap. It's powdered limestone mixed with crushed oyster shell and dried moss, an old-school softener believed to strip out deep oils and bad moods, according to one cheeky grandmother. "Just don't soak your underthings too long," she warns. "You'll start floating." There's science to it, oddly enough. Historians note that certain Ethiopian communities used natural alkalizing agents in their washes long before soap, as we know it, was introduced. The result? A deeper clean, with minimal fiber damage. Your ancestors were doing eco-laundry before it was a hashtag. You dip a tunic into the bowl and swirl gently. The water goes cloudy, but the fabric takes on a faint shimmer. It smells like stone and moss and something unnameable. Maybe memory. And it's not just about cleaning. Today, there's mending too. Several women have gathered under a shade tree, unrolling bundles of clothing in need of repair. You join them and are handed a needle carved from bone, thin, curved, and surprisingly sharp. Next to you, a man is reattaching the collar of a wedding tunic. "My brother danced it right off," he says, chuckling. "Tried to spin like a pot lid." You chuckle too, stitching beside him in companionable silence. The rhythm is soothing. Thread, pull, tie, Snip. Birds chirp overhead. Someone starts humming, a low, sweet tune that catches on the breeze like laundry on a line. Here's a fringe detail you wouldn't expect. Some mending is done with intention, even storytelling. A crooked line of stitches down a shirt? Not a mistake. It mimics the bend in a local river, said to bring luck when worn on market days. A series of tiny X's embroidered into a sleeve hem? It's a flirtation, stitched by someone hoping their crush will notice. You glance around and wonder how many secret conversations are happening in thread. Historians still argue whether these patterns were always symbolic or simply decorative, with meanings added later. Some suggest they began as practical, marking ownership, for example, and were later imbued with layered interpretation. It's the eternal debate. Art first or story first? The sewing continues, and someone pulls out a spool of dyed thread, made from crushed berries and pounded roots. The color is a deep rust red, rich and earthy. "It's stubborn," the woman says, threading her needle. "But so am I." She winks. You resolve to borrow that phrase. Later in the day, you take a break near the shallows, feet dangling into the cool water. Your clothes, cleaned, mended, soaked, are draped on branches nearby, fluttering in the breeze like sleepy flags. You sip from a shared gourd of infused water, mint and lemongrass, and close your eyes. Around you, laughter bubbles like soap suds. Someone slips into the river fully clothed, shouting, "It's self-laundry now!" You consider joining. You do not. Instead, you watch as a child washes a doll-sized tunic beside her mother. Her small hands mimic every move. Dunk, scrub, wring, fold. "That's how we pass it down," someone murmurs beside you. "Not with lessons, with mimicry." You nod slowly, because that's what today has been, a mimicry of the past, and a continuation. There's another small ceremony that happens at these communal washings. Near the end of the day, one elder walks to the river with a single threadbare cloth, something no longer usable, no longer mendable. She lays it gently in the current and lets it drift away, not littering, offering. "Let it carry away old worries," she says, as the faded cloth floats out of sight. "So we don't bring them home." There's no applause, no deep symbolism spelled out. Just the quiet rustle of cloth and water, and the sensation that something important has passed by unnoticed. As the sun begins to dip, you gather your things. Clothes now clean, whole, and softened by both water and story. You wrap them in a fresh sheet, tie the corners, and hoist them gently over your shoulder. And as you make your way back along the same winding path, feet dusty, spirit a little lighter, you can't help but think of all the garments you've met today. Not just fabric, but companions, witnesses, soft carriers of joy, embarrassment, ritual, and resilience. Laundry, you realize, isn't a chore here. It's continuity, and the river, ever faithful, just keeps washing it all through. You're back in the village now, bundle on your back, feet a little sore, but soul completely softened, like linen dried in shade. The sun dips behind a distant hill, and the sky melts into that dreamy dusk palette of coral and violet. It's a good kind of tired, that satisfying kind where your hands ache a bit from work, but your mind feels oddly light. Someone greets you with a bowl of something warm. Thick, savory porridge with lentils and just a hint of cardamom. "For all your wisdom today," they tease. You accept it with mock seriousness and sit on a low stool as chickens cluck sleepily nearby. There's still more to see. As the evening settles in, you're invited into one of the larger homes for what's called a laundry recitation. You weren't expecting this, but apparently, some of the elder women gather every few weeks to tell stories specifically about laundry. Not dramatic tales, but little fragments of memory threaded through routine. You sit on a woven mat beside others. The hearth flickers low. A woman in her 70s begins by holding up a ragged strip of cloth, pale green with a small yellow patch in the corner. She says, "This came from my wedding dress, torn during the rainstorm after the ceremony." Everyone chuckles softly, already sensing the story's warmth. She goes on to describe the mud, the laughter, the unexpected goat that chased her new husband halfway through the village. The cloth had been torn when she tripped, and her sister stitched it back the next day, scolding and smiling at once. The memory is vivid, gentle, like sunlight through gauze. You lean back and let the rhythm of it all wash over you. One by one, others offer their scraps of fabric and the stories that live inside them. There's the towel used to swaddle a baby who now has babies of his own. A headscarf that once flew off during a courtship chase and was later returned tied around a bouquet of wildflowers. A shirt with 3 different types of stitching, each from a different cousin who tried, failed, then passed it along. No object is too humble, no story too small. One man brings out a strip of faded blue. "This," he says, "was from the pants I wore when I met the hyena." Everyone perks up. He grins. It was a peaceful meeting. Sort of. Apparently, he had wandered too close to a den while searching for firewood and froze when he spotted the creature. The hyena stared at him, yawned, and walked away. He sprinted home anyway, and ripped his pants on a thorn bush in the process. His mother scolded him more for the pants than the risk of being eaten. The fabric has a small tear near the edge, mended with orange thread. A reminder, he says, to look before collecting kindling. Laughter bubbles gently around the room. Historians still debate whether this kind of recitation was once formalized. Some argue that village cloth archives existed, passed from generation to generation. Others suggest it was always this casual, this cozy, a culture of living museums carried in chests and story-filled hands. And here you are now, a guest at the very museum. There's something reassuring about it. This idea that life's moments, both meaningful and mundane, can be preserved not in stone or ink, but in stitches and smudges. That your life might one day be remembered not by grand speeches, but by someone holding up a sleeve and saying, "This was theirs. It still smells like eucalyptus. They were always losing buttons." Someone passes you a folded cloth. "Go on," they urge. "You washed enough today to earn a memory." You hold it. It's soft, striped in pale gray and mustard. There's a line of green stitching near one edge, likely done in haste. You smile. You didn't live this cloth's story, but you're now part of its journey. Maybe one day someone else will hold it and say, "This passed through many hands, all careful, all kind." Outside, the wind picks up slightly, rustling the leaves like silk against silk. A young girl sneaks closer to the hearth and lays her blanket by your feet. It's patched in many places, with one corner embroidered in bright yellow stars. "I fixed those," she says proudly. You nod. A masterpiece. The night deepens. Someone begins humming a familiar tune, one you've heard on the path, by the river, in the folds of morning. It's a washing song, but slower now, sleepier. A lullaby made for cloth and people alike. You stretch your arms behind you, yawn without apology, and lean back. The mat beneath you is woven tight, but soft enough. The fire crackles. Someone hands you a small cup of warm, spiced milk, and in that moment, you think about all the laundry you've seen, all the techniques, the traditions, the slips and patches and scrubs. You think about that peculiar technique of pre-scrubbing with volcanic ash, the basket systems, the old river stones smoothed like hand mirrors, the coded folds of laundry messages. You think of women singing stories into hems, men dyeing cloth with stubborn berries, and children learning to mend like it's magic. You also think, oddly enough, of how you'll never look at your own laundry pile the same again. That stack of mismatched socks? An archive waiting to be honored. Because somewhere, between the suds and the stitches, you've discovered that laundry isn't about the clothes. It's about the people who wear them. You awaken slowly. Or maybe you never fully slept. Just drifted in that delicious liminal state where dreams and memory stitch themselves together like careful embroidery. The hearth has gone to embers. The house is quiet now, save for the occasional creak of wood or soft exhale of someone else deep in slumber. The fabric bundle you carried all day is tucked neatly beside you, a little warm still from the room's fading heat. And the final ritual awaits. You step outside just as the sky begins to brighten again. Not with the sharp gold of full dawn, but with that hushed silver that makes everything look like a painting not quite finished. Mist hugs the rooftops. Somewhere, a goat complains in a sleepy bleat. Even the chickens are slow to start. You follow your host down a narrow path, still damp with morning dew, to a small circular space at the edge of the village. It's not fenced or formal, but it carries a quiet gravity. Stones encircle it, and in the center stands a single post with a swatch of cloth tied around it. This is the final stage of laundry, not for garments, but for the soul. It's called the wind airing. Here, cleaned and mended clothes are hung for a short time to greet the rising sun. Not for drying, not for bleaching, but for honoring. Each family brings one item, a favorite shawl, a ceremonial wrap, a child's tunic, and they hang them silently, letting them flutter gently in the morning breeze. You hang yours, a long-sleeved robe with faded embroidery on the cuffs. It sways lightly, catching the wind like it's waving back to the sun. Next to you, a boy carefully pins up his mother's apron. A teenager hangs her father's festival scarf. A wrinkled elder hangs a square of undyed cotton, soft as cloud, worn to almost translucence. The ritual is part folklore, part philosophy. Some say the wind carries away any lingering burdens trapped in the threads. Others believe it helps the clothes remember who they belong to. A few joke that it's just to make the neighbors jealous of how good your soap berries smell. Historians still debate whether the practice had roots in agricultural calendars or spiritual cleansing rites. Was it meant to mark time, bless crops, or simply give the garments a poetic moment of air? No one really agrees, but everyone still does it. A woman passes behind you carrying a woven mat with stones laid carefully along the edge. She's pressing patterns into a damp shawl, using the stone weight and the morning sun to leave temporary floral impressions. Just until the next rain, she says softly. But worth it. You sip from a clay cup of barley tea and watch as the cloths shift in the breeze. It's mesmerizing, calming. You think of flags again, but these don't declare nations or battles. They declare life. I was worn, I was torn, I was washed, and I still flutter. You spot your own robe twisting lazily in the wind and feel oddly proud. It's not the cleanest, not the newest, but it's whole. It tells a story, and that's more than most things in this world. Someone laughs gently nearby and says, "That one flaps like it's got secrets." You grin. Maybe it does. Maybe your robe remembers all the little moments from yesterday. The spilled soap berries, the quiet mending circle, the child who insisted you scrub with both hands, or the dirt winds. You take a deep breath. The air is crisp. Damp grass brushes your ankles. Everything smells like fabric and firewood and faint spice. It's one of those moments you hope will fold neatly into your memory, never fading. The cloths are slowly taken down, each one folded with reverence, almost ceremony. You collect yours, running your fingers along the stitched cuff. tracing the memory back into your mind like a bedtime story on loop. As the group heads back, you trail behind just a bit, lingering near a patch of river reeds. A scrap of fabric flutters there, caught, perhaps, during yesterday's release of the worn cloth. It's pale blue, edges frayed, but still moving gently. You don't touch it, you let it dance. Back in the village, the day begins. But for you, the story winds down. You return to the home where you stayed, where your mat still waits, warm from your absence. You lie down again, not from exhaustion, but for closure. The kind of rest you take not because you need to sleep, but because you've earned a soft pause. The last thing you see before your eyes close again is your robe, now folded at your feet. It looks content, and so are you. And now, friend, you can let your thoughts drift with the same gentle motion as that robe in the morning breeze. Let your shoulders sink just a little deeper into the pillow. Let your fingers go still. You've walked dusty footpaths. You've pounded cloth on smooth stones warmed by the sun. You've listened to stories stitched into hems and watched bright patterns form from memory and moss and dye. All that laundry, done not just to clean, but to connect. Not just to remove stains, but to make space for meaning. Every thread you've touched carried someone's life. Every fold held more than fabric. Let your breath slow now, like the rise and fall of a drying sheet in calm wind. Imagine it. Soft fibers brushing across your skin. Faint scent of wood smoke clinging to clean linen. The hush of quiet laughter fading into evening light. The river still trickles somewhere nearby. The stones still wait for the next wash. But for now, everything is still. No lists, no loads, no detergents to pick. Just the warmth of a story, folded carefully and placed beside you. You don't have to remember every detail, just the feeling that you were there, that you were welcome, that you were part of the rhythm. So go ahead, rest easy now. You've done the laundry, you've told the tale, and the wind, it's still humming softly outside, waiting to carry your dreams just a little further. Good night.